Okay, my name is Stephany McConnell and I'm a member of the team at Business in the Community Northern Ireland. I'm joined by Roisin Kelly from the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland, and we plan to jointly present to you this morning. Just some housekeeping that I'd like to run through briefly. Can you please ensure that your mics remain muted during the full session, and please ensure that your cameras remain turned off. If you experience technical issues during the webinar, please exit the meeting and then rejoin. Due to the large number of delegates, we will be unable to provide any technical assistance. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to type any questions you may have using the chat function, and this will be monitored during the session. The chat function will be the only method used for the Q&A. Please do not raise your hand or turn your mic on to ask a question. Roisin and I will endeavour to answer as many questions as possible, and if we don't get to them all, you can contact us directly for further clarification. And finally, we would appreciate your feedback on the session, so there will be an evaluation form available for you to complete, which will be posted into the chat. So just to run through the learning outcomes for this session, they are how to ensure equality in the recruitment and selection process, how to make recruitment and selection more inclusive, how to recognise unconscious bias and how it can impact the recruitment and selection process, and awareness of the Business in the Community Race at Work Charter and the benefits to your organisation of embracing this charter. Next slide, please, Kat. Okay, so the COVID-19. Yes.
There's no
yes,
slide. There's no screen share. All we can see is you. We can't see the screen, the PowerPoint slide.
Okay, we'll leave it with Kat to.
Can people comment in the chat function? Does that apply to everybody? If you just put a note into the chat function, can you see, where are you able to see the slides, please? Okay, Stephany, I can tell you that most people can see the slides, so there's not a problem with the slides. So if you go back to the slides, for the person who can't see the slides, that must be an issue with your connection, because everybody else can see them. So.
Okay. Can you see the slides now? Yep.
They can, yeah. Everyone can see them, can't? Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Kat. Okay. Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic and 2020's Black Lives Matter campaign are just some examples of events that have shone a light on the different lived experiences of people from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities in the UK. There's a growing desire among Northern Ireland businesses to take action to tackle racism and actively support the inclusion of those from ethnic minority backgrounds at all levels of the workforce. Businesses in Northern Ireland have a key role to play in providing equality of opportunity for all, regardless of race and ethnicity. Next slide, please, Kat. So in addition to the moral and the legal case for diversity, the business case is clear. Diverse organisations perform better, they have higher employee satisfaction and better financial returns and are more innovative. So I'd like to briefly just share some of the research that's been published supporting these facts around the business case. With regards to better financial returns, McKinsey states that companies with strong ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. Deloitte have found that when employees think their organisation is committed to and supportive of diversity and they feel included, their ability to innovate increases by 83%. Could we just make sure that everybody has their mic turned off, please?
No, like that's my point. It's nothing. There doesn't seem to be like an archive of videos, so.
Hello, sorry, as Stephany's asked, can you please turn off your microphone because we can hear people's conversation. So please, microphones off.
Yes, I'll mute all, and then Stephany, if you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
Stephany, sorry, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, Kat, I did there. It must have went back on again. Is that okay now?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, let's go again then. Let's try it again with regards to the business case. So with regards to better financial returns, McKinsey states that companies with strong ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. Deloitte have found that when employees think their organisation is committed to and supportive of diversity and they feel included, their ability to innovate increases by 83%. And PwC conducted a survey whereby 54% of women and 45% of men surveyed said they researched if a company had diversity and inclusion policies in place when deciding to accept a position. So all this evidence demonstrates that inclusive organisations which attract and develop individuals from the widest pool of talent consistently perform better. Next slide, please, Kat. So Business in the Community is a membership organisation for companies that are committed to doing business responsibly and working together on societal issues where they can make a real difference. We have partnered with the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland to produce a series of webinars whereby participants will receive guidance and support on how employers can promote and embrace race equality and inclusivity in the workplace. This session today is the first of 4 events, and our focus this morning is on recruitment and selection. The remaining 3 events, which will take place over the next few months, will have a focus on how businesses can tackle race inequality and embed inclusion in the workplace. We will explore support mechanisms, including reverse mentoring and coaching. Racial harassment and bullying in the workplace will be discussed, and we'll end with an inclusion workshop, which will assist participants in developing a positive action plan for addressing race in their workplace. The Business in the Community Race at Work campaign was established with the support of key business leaders who identified that action by employers on the Race at Work agenda could boost the UK economy and lead to increased productivity and returns. However, these potential gains are being stifled by the barriers faced by the ethnically diverse talent in the workplace. Business in the Community is committed to empowering employers to tap into this economic potential by accelerating change for ethnically diverse employees. So the Race at Work Charter was launched by Business in the Community with the aim of tackling ethnic disparities in the workplace and challenging businesses to proactively support the inclusion of ethnic minorities. The Charter consists of 7 calls to action for organisations committed to improving equality of opportunity in the workplace. Next slide, please, Kat. So these are the 7 calls to action. Number 1, appoint an executive sponsor for race. 2, capture ethnicity data and publicise progress. 3, commit at board level to zero tolerance of harassment and bullying. 4, make equity, diversity and inclusion the responsibility of all leaders and managers. 5, take action that supports Black, Asian, mixed race and other ethnically diverse employee career progression. 6, support race inclusion allies in the workplace. And finally, 7, include Black, Asian, mixed race and other ethnically diverse-led enterprise owners in supply chains. So many of you in this call will be aware that the labour market is changing. The proportion of the working age population that come from a Black, Asian and minority ethnic background is increasing. Employers should be looking to ensure that their recruitment processes do not include any barriers to attracting the best talent. Race, gender or background should be irrelevant when choosing the right person for a role, and more employers are recognising this. Next slide, please, Kat. So signing the Business in the Community Race at Work Charter signals your organisation's serious commitment to fostering race inclusion. It amplifies your organisation's commitment to improving quality of opportunity in the workplace. The commitments made in the Charter will ensure that there's a clear focus on prioritisation of race equality in employment and career progression. So on this slide, you'll see just some of the organisations in Northern Ireland that have already signed the Charter. And at future events, we will hopefully be hearing from some of these organisations and the benefits that they have experienced from signing the Charter. Next slide, please, Kat. So to find out more about the Business in the Community Race at Work Charter, please visit our website. The details are shown on the slide. Thank you for now. I'm now going to hand over to Roisin Kelly from the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland. Roisin, it's over to you, and Kat, please move on to the next slide.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Stephanie, and good morning, everybody. My name is Roisin Kelly, and I'm an Equality Officer with the Equality Commission for Northern Ireland. We are delighted to see so many of you logged on today for our joint event with Business in the Community. And as Stephanie has said, it's the beginning of a series of 4 events that will take place over the next number of months. So I suppose I want to echo a lot of the points that Stephanie has made very briefly in terms of setting the context for today. So obviously we acknowledge that Northern Ireland workplaces are very different today than they were even, for example, 30 years ago. And I think it's really refreshing that people from different nationalities and from ethnic minorities now choose to come and work and live in Northern Ireland. And one thing that we have noted increasingly in terms of our own work with employers is that employers now really do view racial equality and diversity and inclusion as being vital to their business success. And the contributions that employers from ethnic minorities make to our businesses, to our economy, are vital for our continued growth and for prosperity. Having said that, in terms of, I suppose, the context and the background, another point I want to mention is that the topic of racial equality and racism itself have become very charged in recent years. And that's very much come to the fore. We believe that individuals will continue to look to their employers in terms of asking their employers and requiring their employers to bring forth supportive and proactive measures, which not only recognise the inequalities that do persist, but that also take steps to minimise the impact and, more importantly, to address the need for change. Too many individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds continue to experience prejudice and discrimination in terms of accessing the workplace and in terms of progressing as well within work. And our aim today, I suppose, is primarily to give you those practical strategies in order to be able to create those inclusive workplaces and actually getting down to the nitty-gritty of the steps that you can take as employers with your own workforces in order to get this right. So I'm going to, because the focus obviously for today is around recruitment and selection, I'm going to spend the next probably 20 minutes or so taking you through our work and giving you an overview of how we can help you and we can support you. So the focus really is on the Commission's good practice recommendations in relation to recruitment and selection. The purpose of these recommendations is primarily to support you to be able to develop those robust, systematic, fair and objective recruitment and selection procedures, which not only ensure that you are compliant with the legislation, that's vital, that you are on the right side of the legislation and you're not vulnerable to complaints of discrimination, and also to ensure that your organisation is seen as proactive in this area and to help you to take steps towards having an inclusive workplace and promoting equality of opportunity for all. As a side note on one thing that I want to mention here as well, and it's something that we will touch on in more detail in subsequent sessions, is that employers who are seeking to address racial equality need to think about their culture, not just their policies, which I'll be spending a lot of time on today, but also the culture within the organisation. And it's something that we get into quite a bit in terms of our work with employers, because it's crucial that you don't end up having policies which are not effectively implemented in practice. because that will ultimately undermine all of your efforts in relation to this work, and it also will potentially create legal risks for you. Okay. So Stephany has already set the scene, and she's given you some insight into the support that's available to employers in terms of tackling these issues and in terms of racial equality specifically. I want to now briefly talk you through the support that we can offer you in the Commission. So if you could move to the next slide, please, Kat. Thank you. If you could flip forward again, please. Okay. So something that we feel is important to mention, I suppose, in this context, is the issue of unconscious bias. So it's specifically something that we discuss quite a lot with employers in relation to our work. So I suppose the starting point really is that we are all used to thinking of discrimination in terms of individuals who act overtly, people who have bigoted views and who act in an overt way to cause harm or to exclude particular individuals because of their race, etc. And certainly we know that that type of behaviour and that sort of overt discrimination does still occur. However, having said that, unconscious bias is something that has very much been discussed and come to the fore recently in terms of offering another explanation as to why discrimination is still so prevalent in today's workplaces, despite the fact that the vast majority of us, and in terms of polls and research that we have done and that have been done by many organisations, suggest strongly that people are opposed to discrimination, but yet it is still so prevalent. So this issue of unconscious bias is not a new idea, and it has been identified as a significant workplace challenge and something that can be a significant barrier to equality, albeit that it is a subtle one. It can perhaps be more prevalent when it comes to recruitment and selection decisions. So what is unconscious bias? And I'm sure you're all familiar with this concept. Anyone who wants to read more, you can have a look on Google. There's so much information out there in relation to unconscious bias and what it is and what it looks like. One definition is unconscious bias is social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals form outside of their own conscious awareness. So it has been said that unconscious bias manifests itself through our innate preferences towards people who share similar characteristics as we do. And that's, I suppose, the most simple way of explaining that. So there have been so many studies, and we talk about some of them in our training. There's one called Project Implicit, which was a study that was commissioned by Harvard University a number of years ago, I think maybe 20 plus years ago, which essentially it is a series of online tests which individuals can go on and just take. And the idea with the test is that it presents participants with a number of images on screen, and we very quickly respond to those images, and the idea behind it is that it reveals our subconscious preferences. So it's something that you may wish to have a look at, Project Implicit. It's been running for over 2 decades. There have been millions of people that have taken those online tests, and some of the results have come through very conclusively and have evidence things like people have subconscious preferences for young over older people, for example, or for white over black people, or able-bodied over disabled people. Those are some of the themes that have come through in terms of the research results. So it's worth looking at. There are loads of other studies as well, and this work is constantly ongoing. But I think the key point for us is really that we believe potentially that if you are human, then you may be subject to varying degrees to these biases in various aspects of life, including the workplace. And it's also been argued that when we are working under pressure, so for example, when we are involved in those sometimes very complex recruitment and selection decisions, sifting through large volumes of information and working very quickly, working to deadlines, etc., that there is more potential for unconscious bias to creep in, it has been said. So this is not our, our views as the Commission, but certainly it's something that we like to raise as considerations that employers may need to look at. And I know that a lot of employers are spending a little bit of time training key staff within their workplace around these issues of unconscious bias. So what does this mean for today, and why am I mentioning it? Just, I suppose, to conclude, we believe that if you as employers and individuals within your organisations, HR professionals, your line managers, your recruitment personnel, if we recognise and accept that we may be subject to these biases that we're being told that we all have as humans, then what steps can we take to eliminate their impact or to reduce their impact in the workplace? And that is where we believe that these systematic, clear, objective and well-defined recruitment and selection procedures can be really supportive and really beneficial to you as employers. So again, it's something that we put forward as a consideration for you as employers as part of the larger work that you're doing in this area. And we do discuss it a wee bit more at our training. So I want to move on now, if you could, thank you. I want to spend a little bit of time really just explaining the resources and support that is available from the Equality Commission, specifically in relation to recruitment and selection. So I suppose the first thing to say, particularly in relation to those of you that are new to this work, that aren't aware of our guidance, and I know that a lot of you will be, but it's useful to reiterate as well. So Chapter 10 of a publication called the Unified Guide to Promoting Equality of Opportunity in Employment. Okay, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the Unified Guide, we refer to it as. That document has a chapter 10, which specifically deals with recruitment and selection. So essentially, I would describe it as a handbook for employers. And essentially what it does is it sets out quite specific and quite detailed recommendations in relation to each of the key parts and elements of the recruitment and selection process. So there are practical recommendations really in relation to things like advertising, shortlisting an interview, good practice, things like reference policies and things like completing right to work checks. So there's lots of practical information within that publication. So we would say to you as employers that publication should be used as a reference tool for you. And it is available on our website. And another thing to make you aware of is that if you have specific queries, because the advice in the publication is general ultimately, so if you have specific queries or you want a little bit more specific guidance in relation to anything within the guidance, you can contact us. We have an inquiry line and we will be sharing details of that today. Another thing to mention is that the guide is written in the context of the current legislative framework for equality in Northern Ireland. So in other words, following the guidance will be an excellent tool to help you as employers to ensure that you don't knowingly, or as often is the case, unknowingly commit an act of unlawful discrimination in terms of the recruitment and selection decisions that you make. So you can be assured that by familiarising yourselves with the guidance and by following the guidance, that goes a long way to being able to demonstrate that you have acted appropriately as an employer in terms of your recruitment and selection. And something to mention as well, and I don't want to get into the law in any level of detail today, but for those of you that work in human resources, management roles, etc., if you're not familiar with the legislation in relation to equality, then we would invite you, if you wish, to attend one of our free webinars, because we go into the legislation in a lot more detail, and we strongly recommend that anybody in those types of roles is familiar with the legislation and understands just what the practical implications are for you as employers. So all of our webinars are advertised on our website. For the purposes of today, the specific piece of legislation in terms of race is the Race Relations Order 1997. So that prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, colour, ethnic and national origin. Okay, so that is the specific piece of legislation, and please be aware, and more importantly, ensure that key staff in your organisation are aware that there's no length of service requirement for an individual to take a complaint under that legislation. So in other words, if you commit an act of unlawful discrimination in terms of selection for a role within the organisation, an individual can take a complaint even if they're not an employee with your organisation. So understanding all of these key implications and these concepts is vital. And sharing the information with key staff within the organisation is crucial to your success and getting it right in relation to this area. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this slide sets out our key advice to employers in relation to good practice. So declare your commitment. We are an equal opportunities employer, and that's one part of it. And most employers will automatically have that within their, their job advertisements, etc. But again, as I mentioned at the start, it's how you go about actually carrying out that commitment in practice. So act like one, in other words. Ensure that your policies reflect the equality codes of practice. Ensure that your recruitment practices are systematic, fair and objective. That staff are trained to apply these, and that's a big one. Policies are actually followed consistently and always. Reasonable adjustments are made for disabled people, and the best person for the job is appointed. So that idea of the merit principle is something that we get into and we discuss quite a lot in our training. So as a general rule of thumb, you ought to have these practices for ensuring fairness of treatment, and these should be clear, okay? And I'll come on to talk about that in a moment or two. We go into each of these recommendations in a lot more detail than we have time for today at our recruitment and selection training. So we discuss concepts like indirect and direct discrimination, specifically in the context of recruitment, and we give employers examples of when that has occurred, how employers have run into difficulties, and then what the key learnings are and how you can take those and apply them within your own workplaces. Okay, so what we would say is, if you're new to this work, if you have staff joining your organisations or currently within your own organisations who sit on recruitment and selection panels and they haven't had this training, it's vital that you look at a plan for ensuring that this training can be put in place. So you're very welcome to attend our webinars, to share the information on our webinars with staff within your organisation, and we work with employers where we can on a one-to-one basis in terms of assisting you to roll out this training within your own organisation. The training is also an opportunity to discuss the step-by-step practical guidance and just to pull out those kind of really important practical issues in a little bit more detail. For example, we have a lot of pro formas. We have, for example, application forms, shortlisting forms that we are happy to share with employers, that employers can just lift and use them within their own organisations. And we talk about the case law in quite a lot more detail. So there is a lot more support following on from today, and please do feel free to contact us, and we'd be more than happy to work with you and to help you as much as we can in regard to that. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Okay. One point that we can't stress enough, and I suppose something that is crucial to the work that you do in this area, is that your recruitment and selection policy is key. Okay, and it should underpin all of your organisation's activities in relation to recruitment and selection. So it should clearly set out and inform staff about the rules, if you like, in relation to recruiting staff into your organisation. Because if you get it right in relation to your policy, then you're much less likely to have difficulties as you go through the process. If it's done correctly and if your policy is implemented, okay? So that picture on screen is the Commission's model recruitment and selection policy, which is comprehensive. it's excellent, it's up to date, and it reflects the current legislation. So we strongly recommend that you use this as an audit tool, okay, to look at your own policies, update them, or if you wish, you can use our policy. You can adapt it and adopt it within your own organisations. So the policy contains a model policy and procedure. It goes through things like definitions of discrimination, and it includes things like example job descriptions, personnel specifications, example application forms and shortlisting forms. So please do feel free to download the policy. That document in itself will answer so many of your questions in relation to recruitment and selection. It's very, very detailed, and it gives you a good flavour of you know, how you should communicate with your staff and inform staff about things. So have a look at the policy, and please feel free to contact us if you have specific questions in relation to it. Again, having a policy alone, this issue has come up in case law where, you know, employers have a policy and they think, right, you know, that's all that we need to do. Our work is done here. But in actual fact, that is not correct. And you do need to communicate the contents of that policy in an appropriate way to your staff, and ensure that key staff are familiar with and understand how to apply the policy in practice. So as I said already, please do contact us. We have our webinars. We're happy to share our training documentation, all of the support, and we're happy to work with you. We can, on some occasions, provide in-house training, but to be honest with you, our resources are limited at the moment, but certainly contact us, first of all, through our advice line. Ask the question by all means, and we will consider requests individually. So I hope that has given you a good overview of how we can help and the support that is available to you from ourselves in the Equality Commission. I suppose ultimately the shared goal of everyone today, in terms of attending today's session, is to ensure that all applicants to your organisation, including those from Black and ethnic minority communities, perceive our employers here in Northern Ireland as fair and as inclusive, and that everyone is motivated to apply for the roles that you have on offer within your own organisations. And following the advice and guidance that I've referred to today, and the support that Stephany has mentioned as well, will go a long way towards establishing you as an employer of choice, and one that promotes equality of opportunity. So that's all that I want to cover. I hope that that was helpful, and I'm going to hand you back over to Stephany. You see the contact details for ourselves on the slide. So please do feel free to use our services. Our services are free of charge, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Roisin. That was really, really helpful and really informative. Thank you. I'm just going to hand over to Paul, who's been looking after our chat. Are there any questions, Paul, that you'd like us to cover?
Sorry, Stephany. Yes,
okay,
there are a few questions, a few points maybe just to mention that people have asked for some of the guides, and our colleague Kieran has been good enough to download those. Someone has asked about the slides being shared, which is fine. We're happy to do that. It's not a problem. The first question is, I suppose it's for Roisin from my own organisation in relation to race. And the question, Roisin, is that you outlined things, you know, about developing policies and doing training. And one person asked, and this was prior to the event, do they have to do these things? And what happens to you if you don't do them? Is there any penalty for not having a policy, or any penalty for not having training?
Okay, yes. So I suppose the simple answer is no. It's not a legal requirement to do any of this work. However, what we would say to employers is that there is an expectation that employers act reasonably, and you know, all of the guidance that we share in relation to recruitment and selection and other matters is readily available. A lot of the work is already done, and certainly in the cases that we have seen, tribunals have been heavily critical of employers who, you know, don't have these basic policies and procedures in place, or that have them in place but they are not implemented. That's a big one. So that was why I suppose I was making the point that having a policy is one thing, but it's the work that you do in terms of bringing that to life, communicating it and acting on it as well.
Thanks, Roisin. A question for Stephany from BITC was, in relation to your charter, Stephany, what practical help, if somebody decides to sign up to that charter, what practical support will BITC be able to give them?
Okay, thanks, Paul. I suppose, first of all, I would say, if you sign up to the Race at Work Charter, you'll wear the badge of being committed to proactively supporting the inclusion of ethnic minorities in your workplace, and it will demonstrate and seal your commitment to this. What BITC can do to support you is, we'll support your organisation to take action for a more diverse and inclusive workplace through a range of online events where we will share learning and best practice, and there will also be toolkits available for you to access. In addition, we can work with individual companies to support them with their Race at Work journey, and this would be an advisory piece of work tailored to that specific organisation. So there's a variety of things that we can do at BITC to support organisations who sign up to that charter.
And someone else has asked, is this the only area where you would offer such support to employers, Stephany? I mean, are there other areas of employment or equality where you would offer support?
Absolutely. There's too many to go through now, but what I would encourage you to do is, if people want to go onto the Business and the Community website, and there is, there's a large amount of information there that will demonstrate what we can do from a workplace perspective, but also all of the other areas that business and the community would support with, including, environment and education. So please take a look.
And the final one then for Roisin was, Roisin, you talked about inclusive workplaces. How do you begin developing a more inclusive workplace? How do you even begin that? Someone has asked. It seems like a big thing to try and do.
Yeah, and yes, that's a question that we have had from employers, and I suppose the first thing that the most important thing that I would like to say in relation to that is that we are here to help employers, because it can seem overwhelming. We have actually recently just published a handbook, if you like, a joint publication with the Labour Relations Agency, specifically on the issue of promoting inclusive workplaces, and it outlines 6 steps to promoting inclusive workplaces, and it's aimed at giving employers practical guidance, so breaking down this area of work into, kind of practical steps that you as employers can take. So having your policy, training staff on your policy, dealing with issues as they arise, looking at the culture within your organisation, and actually addressing any issues that you identify as part of your work, through your self-surveys, through your exit interviews. Being committed to what you have said that you'll do in the policies is crucial. So there's a lot of practical support that we can give to you, and please do come to us. And I know that this is something that we're going to discuss in a little bit more detail in, I think it's our second session possibly. So please come back to us, and we'll be covering all of that.
Thanks, Roisin. Well, we had 95 employers today, so that shows there's a big interest. So I'll hand back to Stephany, who's going to tie it all up and tell you about the way forward. Thank you, Stephany.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, just to add to that, when we're talking about recruitment selection this morning, if we look at that business case and the research that I mentioned earlier in the session, and if there are recruiters on this call, that candidates are doing their homework when applying for jobs, and they're actively considering the diversity and inclusion side of employers, and calls for diverse and inclusive employers are getting louder. So I'm so glad to see so many people on the call this morning listening to what we have to say. So Just to summarise and finish up, everybody. First of all, Roisin and I would just like to say thank you all for attending this webinar. It's been great to see so many of you registering your interest on this topic of race at work. It just highlights the importance of it. We have covered quite a lot of information this morning, but we hope that you'll take away some key insights on how to make your recruitment selection more inclusive, and how embracing the Race at Work Charter can support your organisation to be more ethnically diverse. If you find today's session helpful, please do consider joining us for the next webinar on the 11th of October, where we'll explore race equality in the workplace further and also hear from some guest speakers, which we're getting lined up. So, you know, it's something to register your interest in. And just to summarise what we're trying to achieve with these series of webinars, we hope to increase awareness of how employers can promote and embrace race equality and inclusivity in their workplace. And we also want to encourage a positive change in employment practices, in policies and procedures that tackle race inequality and embed inclusion into Northern Ireland workplaces. So that's all from me today. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.